Hello everyone, and welcome to a brand new series on hardcore Minecraft. This series should be a lot of fun, however long or short it may be. I have a fairly minimal hardcore experience, having only played a couple of times, and I thought it would be really fun to attempt in a series. I can't say I die a lot in regular Minecraft, but fully expect to die to something silly, so if you want to see how that pans out, make sure to follow along. Lastly, as to what this video entails, it's a fairly basic setting up video, so definitely look out for some cooler stuff in the future. But for now, let's get going, and I hope you enjoy this series. So I started by loading up my brand new hardcore Minecraft world, coming into a fairly basic birch forest, and then started to run around looking for sheep to kill so that I could get a bed as soon as possible to avoid the night. Pretty soon after that I stumbled across my first cave, which was really daunting when you don't have any armor or tools. Here I decided I would make my crafting bench and set about getting some stone in order to make a proper set of tools, which I was going to use to collect the coal and iron that I'd seen, but after I realised that this cave was way too dangerous to be going about with no armour, I quickly decided to find somewhere else that I might be able to find some coal. I also made my bed here just in case it started to get dark, and of course dyed it pink with the pink flowers that I'd found earlier. Then I collected the necessary stone that I would be using to make some tools, and then got spooked by a skeleton, so very quickly decided to abandon the cave, but not before making a stone pickaxe for the journey. I fairly quickly stumbled upon a village which I expected to be super useful, but they didn't even have any farms. Literally the best thing I found was this cartographer's, which I used to set up for the night. I made a furnace so I could finally get some decent food and use it to cook my mutton. The next day I found a load of coal in this shallow ravine, which would be super useful for the future, before setting off to try and find a better place to set up shop. I knew I didn't want to stray too far from the village, as villages will be really helpful for trading later in this series, and when I found this picturesque mountain, I thought it would be an ideal place to stop and dig into the side of to make a tiny little starter base. It was also really useful for yet more coal. But it very quickly started to get dark, and as I was nowhere near that village, I decided that I needed to dig in here and make a tiny little hole for me to spend the night in. I knew I was going to make a strip mine eventually, and I desperately needed a place to set up all of my stuff, so this felt like the most ideal solution at the minute. I immediately placed down my crafting table and got to making the essentials. I really needed a door to stop anything coming in during the night, and as soon as I'd done that, I placed it and then got to making some torches to light up the place a little bit. And then, having slept, I started on that strip mine. I felt like this was the best solution for a hardcore world, as I'd probably like to have some armor before I start doing anything even slightly risky. So iron was definitely a must, and I found quite a lot of it. So I made myself a sword and a chest plate to start off with. Then I went back to a shipwreck and ruined portal combination that I had found earlier on when heading towards the village. I wanted to come back here and see if there was any cool loot in the chests, of which there was some. I was particularly excited about the potatoes, carrots, and the armor trims, which I will definitely be using once I get to diamond. Then I headed over to the ruin portal, which didn't have very much, but definitely some useful stuff for the future, like gold. Then I headed back to my base to plant those carrots and potatoes, as well as some wheat. I was definitely going to need this for the next step, which I wanted to do, which was of course getting some animals and a better farm. Plus, it's a pretty useful and sustainable food source for the time being. After that, I started collecting those animals, starting with the sheep, which I found 2 white sheep and added them to a pen not too far from my farm. Then to the cows, which I put in a pen next to them, just so I don't have to separate them out later. And finally, I got some pigs to complete the set. Hopefully chickens will come in the future, but for now these are good. I found a giant lava pool while scouting out a potential place for a house, then started collecting resources for it. I went for birch and spruce, as I felt that was something I wouldn't usually do, and went for a cute little circular house. I then tended to my farm and farm animals, as you do in the early game, pretty standard, before befriending a horse. I definitely want to build a stable in the future, I think that would be cool. I then collected more house resources, including using a stone cutter to make some roof materials. before heading back to my shell of a house to make these additions. I then found myself in need of spruce wood, but this one sapling was taking ages to grow. So I made myself a saddle for my horse, which still feels odd, and then I could ride my horse around. The sapling still had not grown, so I filled in the floor while waiting and decided that I would go collect more resources and make a campfire so that I could have a little chimney. I didn't bother building a fireplace as this is a really simple little house, but used these trapdoors to cordon it off, and I can still use it to cook if I want to. I finished off my roof and then toyed around with some planters, which I eventually decided had to be closer to the house. I then gathered some more resources to go back into the mines, as I still had very minimal iron, and that definitely needed to change. Can't be using those stone pickaxes. I quickly found more coal and eventually came across diamonds, but I needed to go and craft myself an iron pickaxe, which I then used for this gold and diamonds. I then found a cave, but I didn't even have full iron armor, so was way too scared to do this in hardcore. So I decided the best solution was to bridge across so that I could continue my strip mine, which was fairly useful. I eventually found some more diamonds and was in desperate need of some more iron, which I found, as well as some stuff like gold, which will eventually be useful for when I go into the nether. I eventually found so much iron that I was able to stop relying on those stone pickaxes, and I knew I had enough to craft myself a full set of iron armor, which is definitely something I felt I needed being in hardcore, as I don't really want to face anything that I couldn't definitely kill. I spent ages in this strip mine looking for as many resources as I could collect, so that hopefully in the future I'll be able to do more building, especially with deep slate, which is definitely a favourite building block of mine. I then found a mine shaft, which of course I was way too scared to go and investigate, so I happily continued along with my strip mine until I found yet another cave and decided to go around it to collect all the resources I could without having to go too far in. And with that, I continued along and collected some tuff, which I also like to build out of, until I found this large cave, which actually looked like a viable place to start. However, without a full set of iron armor, I decided that I would leave this for now, but not before looking around to see if there was anything I could possibly take and lighting it up a little bit for the next time I come back down here. It looks like a great starting place to go down into the mines, but I did not want to risk it just yet, and I really wanted to head back to the surface to see if my spruce sapling had grown so that I could finally finish my house and move my stuff in. However, it had not, so I headed straight back to the spruce forest to collect some saplings. I brought them back to my tiny little house so that I would not need to go back there anytime soon. I put all the iron I'd found in a furnace and was actually pretty happy with my finds. Then I used the spruce to create some little accent blocks to add to my house, specifically for some windowsills and for some extra detailing using the fences. It's not the best starter house, but it'll definitely do, and I'll be able to do more with it in the future. And I was finally able to get those spruce trapdoors so that I could finish off the planters I had put in so long ago. And here is it mostly done except for its door. Now the outside was mostly done, I was able to finally finish the floor before heading back to my little hole in the wall, where I was able to use all of my iron that had finally smelted to craft that full set of iron armor, which I was in desperate need of, and it looks pretty good. I then headed back to my house and filled it with all of my stuff and showed off my little fireplace before finishing off here. And here is my finished tiny little cottage with added leaves. Overall, I think it's a very basic starter house, and I will add all of the rest of my stuff in the next episode. But that is it for now. I hope you enjoyed this very short mini first episode of my hardcore series. If you enjoyed the episode, please consider leaving a like. I can't wait to see what else we get up to in the rest of this series. I know it's going to be loads of fun. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next time.